We have breaking news coming out of the Middle East. The thing that we've been warning about for a while has now officially happened. Israel has invaded southern Lebanon. It remains to be seen how big this is. Israeli media has described the leadership of Israel as saying this was a, quote, limited incursion, a limited advance. We don't know what the limited means. Does that mean that they're going to go all the way to the Litani River? Does that mean that they're going to go 5 kilometers in? It's unclear what's meant right this time. The only thing we do know is that there are massive explosions going on inside of Beirut again, and all kinds of airstrikes in the forward area. There are Israeli tanks and armored personnel carriers that have been moving in. We've been seeing reports even before the sun went down in Israel earlier today that they had been sent special forces in to help reconnaissance and get target acquisition. There's lots of confusing information coming out. No surprise when you have an invasion like this, especially overnight when there's lots of the media in Israel is actually under a ban. They're not allowing their local media to report on anything that's happening, in no locations of where troops are going in, et cetera, in order to remain operational security. The Arab media, on the other hand, is under no such limitations, and they are trying it. I was actually just on an X Spaces with Mario not long ago, and there was a lot of breaking news, and some people who were on the ground inside Lebanon, some as close as 5 or 6 kilometers away from some of the fighting, were reporting on that venue live. And so we got to hear from them, and they were reporting all kinds of the sounds of armored vehicle moving. They said lots of explosions, what sounded like tank fire. So we're not sure exactly what's going on, but we want to talk a little bit about some of the ramifications of what may be coming. You see on the screen there some white phosphorus shells have been used. There's a lot of concerns of that could be an illegal weapon. It depends entirely upon how it's used. We actually have those exact shells in American inventory. When I was an artilleryman, we actually had those on our howitzers. So it depends on how they're used, but that is one of the things going on there. They could be used for signaling, for smoke, for diffusion. It could be to burn enemy equipment, et cetera. So we don't know, but the bottom line is that this is appears to be a full-fledged invasion into southern Lebanon. And as we've been giving you information, they have mobilized a number of reserve brigades. They've been moving some of their combat forces out of the Hamas area in the Gaza Strip and up into this area here. And part of the reason they may say this is a limited incursion is just because Israel is limited in how much force they actually have, how many troops they have, and all of the weapons of war, the ammunition, the logistics, the supplies, just simple things as much as like water for troops, food for the troops, all these things, the lubricants, the cleaning equipment. I mean, it sounds kind of inane, but those are things that are absolutely essential to maintain an offensive. And so far, the Israeli forces, the Israeli leaders have openly and publicly announced that the invasion has begun, but they have not yet given any objectives. And that's one of the first things I'm going to be looking for to find out, what are the parameters that they have set? Do they have attainable military objectives? And as we've been talking here a lot, it's hard for me to imagine they're going to come up with something good, because the amount of troops that they have, the amount of ammunition that they have, is limited in relation to that whole area there, basically the width and the breadth of Lebanon, and then up to the Litani River, which I've shown you a few times here, about 25 kilometers away. We had last week Naftali Bennett and some of the other Israeli leaders. I think Daniel Hagari was one who said that the objective is going to be push Hezbollah all the way back to the Litani River. Now, especially coming in light of the fact that they have assassinated Hassan Nasrallah, the leader. They have killed a large number of senior generals. They have decimated the command and control systems, the communication systems, especially of many of the strategic forces up in the north. And so Hezbollah has been severely damaged by what's happened up so far, and it's going to really harm their ability to defend against Israel, especially coming in the dark like they're doing right now. However, there's a big asterisk on that, and we need to be sober-minded on what's going to be expected here. This is not going to be like some kind of Desert Storm deal where, we had a shock and awe, and once we had all these big explosions, actually some of those that Gary was showing a second ago are reminiscent of some that we had in Baghdad when that war began in March of 2003. And then you had these big columns of tanks and Americans rolling in, and within a month, Baghdad was taken. Don't expect anything like that here. The terrain is radically different. The amount of Israeli forces are dramatically smaller than anything that we had, whether during Desert Storm or during Operation Iraqi Freedom. And the terrain itself is much more difficult. But remember, the Hezbollah side has been really preparing for this since the end of the 2006 war, but especially over the last decade or so, they have been building, significant defensive positions that have probably minefields in the various ports or places where they're probably placing them right now. I would wager. They have mobile anti-tank teams, shoulder-launched rockets, not unlike what you probably saw of the Ukrainian forces when Russia invaded in February 2022. So you'll have lots of hit-and-run kind of tactics. These troops are trained for guerrilla-type warfare. They're trained to fight in this area, and no doubt they've done lots of rehearsals in their area of operation. So these groups are formed so that they can fight independently. If they lose all their communications, they know what they need to do in their area, and they probably have rehearsals. They probably, practice how to hit in the flanks of different convoys, et cetera, going up. So this will be a very, very difficult and bloody fight for the Israeli side, no matter what. Concurrently, we have the United States announced earlier this afternoon that thousands more American soldiers are going forward and being sent to the region, and especially air power. F-15 Strike Eagles have been sent, F-16s, F-22 squadrons, all have been added on top of what's already in the region. And one of the questions that we need to be asking is towards what end? We have no mutual defense treaty with Israel. We are not a part of any kind of a war against Hezbollah. So the United States military should not be sending any extra forces in there. And of course, the big concern is, does somebody think that we're getting ready to fight Iran? Because that would literally imply a state-on-state war. If we fought against Iran, or against anyone for that matter, that is a war. And that cannot be ordered by the President of the United States if we're going to follow the rule of law. If we're going to follow the 1973 War Powers Act, the U.S. Constitution, it requires congressional authorizations first. The only exception is if the United States or its troops are being directly engaged by an enemy force or are about to be. None of those conditions exist. Ergo, if we're going to follow the rule of law, before President Biden gives one order for one American to get anywhere near harm's way, he has to get congressional authorization. Now, sadly, the way that Congress is these days, they'll probably give that authorization if asked. But nevertheless, we need to have that conversation, and that debate needs to take place in the public, in the open, so that the American people get to weigh in. Because if we're going to be drawn into another war, then we have every, not just right, but we demand the right to actually have our say first, not just be handed an after the fact situation to where we're sent into combat and then we quote can't withdraw from that. That's how things normally work, and I'm on record right now saying that dang sure better not happen again. This is something that Congress needs to be talking about right now. I mean, starting tomorrow at the latest. This needs to be high on the agenda of when you debate what is going on and what is America's vital national interest, what's at stake for us, and what's at risk for us. And I can assure you, no matter what anybody wants to tell you, and I've shown some on this channel, some Americans who are cheerleading for this. And I could just practically bet large amounts of money that Jack Keane, Lindsey Graham, John Bolton, and many of their ilk are already getting ready to go on the news, if they haven't already gone, and saying it's all about Iran. They're the head of the snake, and we need to go after them. And they're going to try to draw us into a war. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it at all. And if you think that's an exaggeration, listen, we showed you some of the comments that Netanyahu made at his UN General Assembly speech before striking Nasrallah. But here's his comment from earlier today when he gave a direct threat to the Iranian regime. Before this video started, I'm about to show you, he started by saying, "This is a message to the people of Iran." He continued on like this.
Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Muhammad Dev. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. But you know one simple thing. Iran's tyrants don't care about your future, but you do. When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different.
Okay. Valid question here. What do you mean when you're free? And that moment will come a lot sooner than many people think. That sounds like you have something in mind. And again, he just sent people in to fight in southern Lebanon. And yet, before that first tank crossed the border, he's now talking to the people of Iran, saying that something's coming there. And if you think that there was any question about whether or not he had their attention, he issued a similar statement prior to assassinating Nasrallah when he sent a message to, quote, the people of Lebanon. And then he struck. So I guarantee you the leaders of Iran are much more worried now than they might ordinarily be. And if you think that's a positive thing, you need to think again, because what that does is lower the risk and lower the threshold for Iran to potentially get involved. Now, I know that is Netanyahu's desire. It is self-evident from actions that he desires to get the United States drawn into a war. So he wants that war to start, because if it does, even if it's against Israel, that will give him all the justification in the world to say, hey, I need your help. You guys come in, please help us. And the likes of all these Americans I just mentioned a minute ago will no doubt cheerlead that on. But we need to look, and what is Iran's play here? Will they take the bait and will they fight, or will they stand down? Now, look, it's important to understand Hezbollah is the major player for Iran in the region. They're their number one proxy, but it is their proxy. So they have a number of them across Iraq and Syria and some of these smaller groups, of course, definitely the Houthis in Yemen. We've talked about this a lot before, but it's understand to look at how it looks at the strategic view from Tehran's perspective. They have all these groups to try and hem Israel in, to try to limit what Israel can do to Iran. So while Iran wants to support and maintain all of these groups, they're not necessarily willing to go and die for them. They have them to help Iran, not the other way around. So it's not an automatic assumption that because Hezbollah, if they start to get attacked, and I mean, they've already been attacked, obviously, but now that they're being invaded, if it turns out that despite what I think is going to happen, Israel starts to succeed and one day maybe even destroys Hamas, that still doesn't guarantee that Iran is going to come in, because they do have a large space in between them and Israel. Iran's number one objective is regime survival. So they are not likely to take action if they believe that war can be avoided and that they can maintain power. But here's the part of the problem for them in the risk benefit calculus, is that was also the same idea that Nasrallah had. He had this big missile arsenal, which he had as a deterrent against Israel from coming in and attacking him. Pardon me. But his calculation proved wrong, because he thought that those missiles would prevent Israel from attacking him. And that was a fatal miscalculation, because he was then killed by that. And that arsenal to date has still not been used. Israel has been treading a lot of their missile forces for quite some time. And a lot of these strikes have been going on to minimize the missile threat that could be posed. But a lot of that is just suspected target sites. Israel doesn't know for sure that every missile they fired actually took out a missile on the other side, or a missile carrier, as what they claimed. So some of that continues the list, which means that Israel will have to say, okay, we have our missile inventory and a lot of these theater ballistic missiles, so that Israel will be deterred not to attack Iran. But now if they can't be sure that calculations exist, they may themselves come into a point to where they're thinking, okay, this could be a use it or lose it deal, especially if Israel ever launches an attack onto Iran proper. That, I think, could change the dynamic. So the bottom line is right now, I doubt that Israel will immediately respond. In fact, I think it's very unlikely that they would do so. But there was a meeting earlier today between the Prime Minister of Russia, not President, not Putin, but the Prime Minister, met in Tehran with the leaders of Iran. They were there to talk about a number of things, part of which was getting ready for the meeting in Kazan for the BRICS, which, by the way, is their number one priority right now. That's also Russia's number one priority. So I have no doubts that that was part of their conversation today. There was some reports. We're not sure if this is actually accurate or not, but definitely a lot of reporting, especially on X, that Putin made an emergency run to the Kremlin tonight after this event happened, after this attack was confirmed, for a meeting in there. No, we don't have any more information than that, and we don't even know for sure that that's the case, but this is by BRICS News here. And what I can tell you is for sure that especially China and Russia, but probably equally so Iran, wants to make sure that meeting with BRICS comes off without a hitch. And they don't want this this attack to actually interdict that. And of course, if they go into combat operations there before that happens, then that could throw off a lot of the political stuff and the economic stuff that Putin and Xi Jinping especially really want to accomplish here. So I would guess that no matter what, Russia is going to say to Iran, don't do anything before Kazan, which I think is still a couple of weeks away. It's not too much further. I want to say the 20th or 21st of October. So it's about 2 or 3 weeks away still. And after that, though, things could change a lot because Russia is dependent on Iran. So if Iran should get drawn into the war, especially if the United States gets involved, then we cannot rule out the possibility that Russia could help Iran. Putin has been very clear of saying because the United States has allowed a lot of our weapons to be used by Ukraine against Russia, that he will no longer close off for himself to allow Russian weapons to be used by enemies of America against the U.S. So it would certainly stand to reason why it's in Russia's interest that Iran stay in power and that they continue to have the ability to make drones for them, that they continue to ship missiles and other kinds of rockets and other ammunition that they're getting. So you can see where it may be Israel's interest to draw Iran into a war and draw the U.S. into it. It is not in Russia's interest to allow that to happen. And therefore, it should not be in America's interest to get drawn into the war, period. And let me just talk about that, too, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, and some of it's intentional, by these folks who say, yeah, we should join in with them. We should join in with Israel, and we should fight Iran. Folks, if you think the Iran or the 2003 Operation Iraqi Freedom war with Iraq was a bad move, that is nothing compared to what would be if we got sucked into a war here against Iran. Because number one, Iran is substantially larger than Iraq was. But number two, they're also a lot harder to get to. So our ability to go to war with Iran would require hundreds of thousands of ground troops to go in to eliminate. Now, I know there are so many people who say, no, we wouldn't have to use ground troops at all. I bet Jack Keane would be leading this charge. All we got to do is fire a few missiles. This is an air power deal. That's all you got to do. You can blow up a lot of stuff with air power, even if Iran got some air defense weapons from Russia. What they have and what they might get is insufficient numbers to protect the whole country. So we could definitely get a lot of stuff through there and cause tremendous damage, and we could blow up all kinds of stuff. No question about it. You can't win a war that way. You can fight that way, but you can't win a war that way unless you go in on the ground and defeat the enemy forces and take them out. They will keep fighting. They have their own missiles. And by the way, they also have an even bigger card than that. They have the ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which would just send oil prices through the roof for the entire world. It would cause ripple effects in economies all over the world. And our economy is not exactly a picture of strength that if you suddenly popped up the price of oil by scores or perhaps even $100 per barrel, which is not at all unreasonable if the Strait of Hormuz gets shut down, that would cause problems for ourselves. And we've already seen what happened when we thought we were going to harm Russia with sanctions, et cetera. That's nothing compared to what would happen to our economy if the Strait of Hormuz gets shut down. Now, Iran's not going to do that unless they feel it's an existential threat for them, because that also deprives them of the money. So it's not a situation they would take lightly. But my point being that if we get into a war with Iran and they think that their government is threatened, there's lots of actions that they could take. And by the way, all of these American bases that are all in this region, all of them are subject to Iranian missiles. And they're vulnerable to them in ways that a lot of these proxies that have been firing are not vulnerable, because the weapons that Iran has that they could fire, these precision missiles that they have, and they've shown the ability to have pinpoint strikes, even in Saudi Arabia a couple of years back. They could decimate our forces in the area. If it gets into a war, we could suffer lots of casualties. And again, you can fire lots of missiles, but unless you go in on the ground, you cannot defeat Iran. You can harm them only, but they have the ability to harm us back too. They don't even have a force. They don't even have the potential to invade Israel. They can only shoot missiles. That's all they can do, or just cause mayhem in the area. But if you unleash this, I'm telling you, this could be so much worse than anything we have faced so far. And of course, you can't extract this out of the big geopolitical global situation, with the whole situation in the Russia-Ukraine war potentially on the verge of collapse for the Ukraine side, or things going on in the Indo-Pacific area. That's just staying even hot, especially things going on with the Philippines and other things with Taiwan. We're trying to send a lot more weapons to Taiwan, and that's obviously angering China. And listen, all of these things keep coming from an inventory of American ammunition, especially, that's already close to the breaking point. We cannot afford to get into a war where we have to fight and then use a lot of these weapons and then still think you're going to give a bunch to Taiwan, a bunch to Ukraine, and a bunch to Israel at the same time we're having to expend them and just hope like hell we don't get into a war anywhere else. Because we just don't have enough ammunition or capability for that. It would be a massive mobilization where we would have to go into a wartime footing. And that has all kinds of ramifications, both for our forces itself and also for our economy, on top of the situation, which would, like I said, with Strait of Hormuz. Everything bad can happen. I know we've sent forces to the region already, and I know there's just this reflexive hatred of anything Iran, and everybody wants, or not everybody, but many people want to go and fight Iran. Let me just put the brakes on this and pour some cold water on this and tell you, don't do it. Don't go down that path, because we don't have the resources or the capacity to engage in a sustained combat operations. We should not even try. This is the time we need to tell Israel, cool your jets. Just you've made an incursion in there. Let it be some kind of demonstration and then come back. And then let's get into some diplomacy. That's what still can happen, even as late as this is, if it appears to be only if Biden is willing to say, all right, y'all done your stuff and you've ignored all my warnings. You crossed the last red line. My last red line has been crossed. That's it. You're on your own now. You think you want to keep having all these huge air and missile strikes, this sustained situation? Good luck making them for yourself, because you're done with us. We're not going to give you any more. That's what should happen. But I know that the reality of the situation, right before a presidential election, there is no chance in hell that anybody is going to tell Israel no now. In fact, they'll probably be beating each other up, Trump and Kamala Harris both, along with Biden, trying to figure out who's going to be the most pro-Israel right now, because that's what they think is going to be winning electorally. Oblivious to the fact that doing that could be the very cause of a significant collapse of our empire, and a harm to our way of life, and a harm to our troops. You keep saying that you care about our troops and thank God for you guys defending us and all this stuff at baseball games and football games and stuff. I don't care about any of those words if your actions are going to send our men and women into a combat zone where they can be killed and they're not even needed to fight, because our security is not at risk. We need to stop, put the brakes on this right now before this goes any further. All right. Well, that's all we got for you. That's all we really know right now. I apologize for my voice. I've been on the air a lot today, but we're going to keep you appraised on this every bit of the way. We're going to give you, the analysis of what's happening and the risks and the possibilities of different courses of action we can take all the way through. We're going to be with you the whole way. Thanks for joining with us, and we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.